Stop telling people what you do. Let your results speak. That one sentence, if you actually live by it, will change the entire trajectory of your life, and yet almost nobody follows it. We live in a world that rewards announcement over achievement. We post the plan before we've taken the first step. We tell the group chat before we've told ourselves the truth about whether we're actually going to follow through. And then, somewhere between the announcement and the actual work, the fire quietly goes out. Nobody notices it going out. You don't notice it going out. You just wake up 3 months later, the goal still unfinished, and you wonder what happened to that excitement you felt the day you told everyone about it. Here's what happened. You spent it. You spent the excitement the moment you spoke it out loud. That's the part nobody tells you. Talking about a goal feels like progress. It lights up the same reward system in your brain that actually finishing something does. So when your friends nod, when they say that's amazing, when they tell you they're proud of you before you've done a single day of real work, your brain quietly checks a box. It thinks this is going well. It relaxes. And a relaxed brain doesn't grind. A relaxed brain doesn't wake up at 5 in the morning when it's cold and dark and nobody's watching. It stays in bed because as far as your nervous system is concerned, you already got the reward you were chasing. This is the trap. Not laziness, not lack of ambition. The trap is premature celebration. You celebrated the idea before you built the thing. And once you've celebrated, the motivation to actually build it quietly drains away. Because motivation was never really about the goal in the first place, it was about the applause. And you already got your applause. I want you to think back to a time you told someone your big plan. Maybe it was a business, maybe it was a fitness goal, a book you were going to write, a degree you were going to finish, a habit you were finally going to break. Think about how good it felt in that moment, the nodding, the encouragement, the little bit of admiration in their eyes. Now think about what happened next. Did the plan get done? Be honest. For most people, the answer is no. Not because the plan was bad, not because they weren't capable, but because the moment they spoke it out loud, some of the pressure that should have pushed them toward the finish line quietly leaked out into the room and disappeared. There's an old idea, one that shows up again and again in the lives of people who actually build things that last, that ambition needs privacy the way a seed needs soil. You don't dig up a seed every day to check if it's growing. You don't hold it up to the light and ask your neighbors what they think of it. You bury it, you water it, and you leave it alone in the dark until it's strong enough to survive being seen. Most people do the opposite with their dreams. They dig them up before the roots have even formed. They hold them up for everyone to inspect, to poke at, to question. And then they wonder why the thing never grows. Let me tell you about 2 people I've watched closely over the years, because their stories say more than any lecture ever could. The first was a young man, sharp, likable, full of energy. He had an idea for a small online business, nothing revolutionary, just a smart, simple idea executed well could have made him a real living. And he was so excited about it that he couldn't help himself. He told his family at dinner. He told his college friends over drinks. He posted about it online, a vague but confident little caption about how he was building something big. Everyone congratulated him. Everyone told him how proud they were. For about 2 weeks, he was on fire. He researched, he made a logo, he even bought a domain name. And then the questions started. His uncle asked him what made him think this would work when so many businesses like it had failed. A friend jokingly said he'd believe it when he saw it. Someone online commented that the idea had already been done 100 times. None of these comments were cruel. Most of them weren't even meant to hurt him. But each one landed like a small stone, and after enough stones, the water gets murky. He started doubting the idea he had once been so sure of. He started explaining himself more than building. Every conversation about the business became a defense of the business instead of progress on the business. 8 months later, the domain name expired, quietly, unnoticed, the same way the whole dream had quietly expired long before that. The second person was a woman I knew from a much smaller, quieter town. She wanted to change careers entirely, from an unrelated field into something technical, something that required real skill and real study. She didn't announce it. She didn't post about it. She didn't even tell her closest friends what she was doing until she was nearly a year into it. What she did instead was wake up 2 hours earlier than she needed to every single day and study. No one clapped for her in month 1. No one told her how proud they were in month 3. There was no audience, no applause, no little dopamine hit to trick her brain into thinking she'd already arrived. There was only the work, done quietly, day after day, in a room with the door closed. When people finally did find out, because eventually results are impossible to hide, they were stunned. Not because the transformation was flashy, but because it was real, finished, undeniable. She didn't need to convince anyone it was happening. It had already happened. Her results did what no announcement ever could have done. They made the argument for her, without her having to say a single word in her own defense. That's the difference. One person spent his energy convincing people the plan was good. The other spent her energy making the plan true. And only one of those things actually gets you anywhere. Now some of you are thinking, but isn't it good to have accountability? Doesn't telling people keep you honest? And yes, accountability has real value, but only under very specific conditions. It only works when the person you're telling is someone who will hold the bar high for you, not someone who will simply cheer for the idea of you succeeding. There's a big difference between a mentor who checks in and asks hard questions about your actual progress and a group chat that just says you got this every time you post an update. One creates pressure that pushes you forward. The other creates a false sense of completion that quietly lets you off the hook. If you're going to share your goal with anyone before it's finished, share it with someone who will ask you what you actually did this week, not someone who will simply admire what you say you're going to do. And here's something worth sitting with for a moment. Not everyone who smiles and nods when you share your plans is actually rooting for you. That's a hard truth, but it's an important one. Some people will hear your ambition and feel, somewhere underneath the polite encouragement, a small twinge of discomfort, because your movement reminds them of their own stillness. They won't sabotage you outright. Most people aren't villains. But their subtle hesitation, their gentle "are you sure?" their quiet silence when you expect enthusiasm, all of it seeps into you if you let it. Doubt is contagious, and the fastest way to catch it is to expose an unfinished dream to too many opinions before it's strong enough to withstand them. There is also a kind of power in surprise, in letting people see the finished thing instead of the process of building it. Think about the last time someone showed you a result you didn't see coming, a business that suddenly existed, a body that had visibly transformed, a skill that had clearly been mastered, all seemingly out of nowhere. Didn't that hit differently than watching someone talk about it for a year first? There's a reason for that. When you watch someone announce, hesitate, restart, and announce again, you slowly stop believing the outcome is coming. But when a result simply appears, fully formed, it commands a kind of respect that no announcement ever earns. People don't admire declarations. They admire evidence. Momentum works the same way water works. It needs a clear channel, or it scatters. Every time you stop to explain your plan to someone, you are, in a very real sense, diverting the water. You're taking energy that should be flowing toward the goal and redirecting it toward justification, toward performance, toward managing how other people perceive you. And explanation, once it becomes a habit, is exhausting in a way people rarely admit. You start to feel like you're always updating an audience instead of always taking the next step. The most productive people you'll ever meet are usually the hardest people to get updates out of. Not because they're hiding something shameful, but because talking about the work and doing the work draw from the exact same well of energy, and they've chosen wisely to spend that energy on the work. I think about the discipline of a craftsman working quietly in his shop, or a writer who disappears for a year and comes back with a finished book instead of 100 updates about a book in progress. There is something almost sacred about unfinished work being left alone to become itself. A dream that is still forming is fragile in a very particular way. Not fragile like it will break, but fragile like wet clay, easily reshaped by every hand that touches it. If 10 people give you 10 opinions on your still forming idea, you don't end up with your idea anymore. You end up with an idea shaped by committee, diluted, cautious, safe, the opposite of the bold thing you originally imagined. Protecting your plans in their early stage isn't about ego or secrecy. It's about protecting the shape of the thing you actually meant to build. Let's talk honestly about why so many of us struggle with this, because it's not really about strategy, it's about a need. We want to be seen as capable before we've proven we're capable. We want the identity of the ambitious person, the disciplined person, the successful person, And it feels so much faster to claim that identity out loud than to earn it in silence. But identity built on announcement is hollow, and on some level we know it. That's why the validation from telling people feels good for a moment and then leaves you feeling strangely empty right after. You wanted to feel like you'd become someone. Talking about it gave you a cheap imitation of that feeling, and cheap imitations never satisfy for long. Real confidence, the kind that doesn't need constant refueling from other people's opinions, is built a different way. It's built through a private track record, the quiet personal knowledge that you said you'd do something and then you did it, with no one watching, with no one clapping, with nothing to prove to anyone but yourself. That kind of confidence doesn't evaporate the moment someone criticizes you, because it was never dependent on anyone's approval to begin with. It's yours. You built it alone, in the quiet hours, and no comment section, no skeptical relative, no jealous acquaintance can take it away from you, because they were never part of how it was made. So let me ask you something, and really sit with the answer instead of rushing past it. What is it you've been talking about instead of doing? What plan have you explained to 5 different people this month that you haven't actually worked on this month? What dream have you turned into a topic of conversation instead of a project on your desk? I want you to notice, without judgment, how much of your energy has gone into being perceived as someone who is about to do something instead of quietly becoming someone who has already done it. Here is the shift I want to challenge you to make starting today. The next time an idea excites you, don't reach for your phone to tell someone. Reach for a notebook or a task list or the first small action the idea requires. Let the excitement fund the work instead of funding a conversation. Give yourself 30 days of complete silence on any new goal. No updates, no posts, no casual mentions at dinner, and just watch what happens to your focus. Watch how strange it feels at first, almost like withdrawal, because you've trained your brain for years to seek that little hit of approval before you've earned it. And then watch how that strange feeling turns into something else, clarity, space, a kind of private intensity that people who talk too much never get to experience, because they're always managing an audience instead of managing a craft. When the 30 days are up, you won't need to announce anything. The results will already be doing the announcing for you. Someone will notice the change in your body, and you won't have to explain the diet you've been on. Someone will hear about the business already generating its first sales, and you won't have to convince them it was a good idea. It will already be a good idea, proven, standing on its own. Someone will read the finished chapters of the book you never mentioned you were writing, and their surprise will mean more to you than 100 comments of encouragement ever could have. Because that surprise is earned. It's real. It's the difference between being believed and being seen. This isn't about becoming closed off or secretive as a personality. It's not about refusing to ever share good news, and it's not about isolating yourself from people who love you. It's about timing, and it's about protecting what's fragile until it's strong. Share your finished chapters, not your outline. Share your results, not your intentions. Share your harvest, not the seed still buried under the soil. There is a season for silence and a season for celebration. And the mistake almost everyone makes is trying to celebrate during the season meant for silence. Because here's the truth that took me a long time to fully understand. The world does not remember what you said you were going to do. Nobody writes down your announcements. Nobody keeps a record of your intentions. What people remember, what actually moves them, what actually changes how they see you and how you see yourself, is what you built while no one was paying attention. It's the version of you that showed up in the dark, unseen and unapplauded, and did the work anyway. That version of you is the only one who ever actually finishes anything. That version of you is the only one whose results are worth speaking for themselves. So close this out with me. Stop telling people what you do. Start simply doing it. Let the silence be your workshop. Let the doubt of others stay outside the door because it was never invited in. Let your discipline be private, your momentum be protected, and your progress be something only you and the work itself are privy to, until the day it's finished, and then, and only then, let it speak. Because when it does speak, it will speak louder, clearer, and more convincingly than anything you could have said about it 100 times over. Your results are the only argument that never needs defending. Go build something worth that kind of silence.